So before we jump into Numbers chapter 6, I just want to briefly recap where we ended last lesson on the waters of testing. So if a husband had suspected his wife of adultery, he was to take her to the tabernacle, or in later days the temple, and she was to drink water mixed with the dirt from the floor of the tabernacle as a way of demonstrating whether or not she had committed adultery. And the point I was trying to make last class is that Joseph, if he did not believe Mary's story that the angel Gabriel had appeared to her and announced the incarnation, Joseph, being a good Jew, a just man who follows the law of Moses, would have subjected Mary to the waters of testing. However, he does not, which means that if Joseph is perfectly fulfilling the law of Moses and he does not submit Mary to this test, that means that Joseph believes Mary. Then that brings the question, why does Joseph decide to put Mary away quietly and divorce her? That would be because Joseph sees himself as unworthy to be the foster father of the Messiah. And then the angel appears to Joseph to course correct him on that notion. But based off of the numbers, you can say confidently that Joseph, was assenting to Mary's story. Because clearly this didn't happen in the relationship. So let's move on to chapter 6. Chapter 6 details the Nazarites. Now, sometimes people get mixed up with Nazarites and Nazarenes. So you two actually had in Ms. Hartwell's classroom too.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Nazarene is it's like a place. I think people come from Nazareth, and then Nazarites are people who are especially, they're like Samuel and Samson. They were especially given to God, or consecrated to God by their parents, or like that's what God was saying about the firstborn. Kind of, He'll set them aside. They don't necessarily have to be priests. They're just set aside to do God's will.
Yeah, yep, that's exactly right.
Samuel and Samson were both Nazarites, but one wasn't a good one.
Yep. So they are they're a special case of lifelong Nazarite. So you can be a Nazarite for just a certain period of time, as well as we're going to see. So a Nazarite is someone who takes a vow. And we're going to read the details of the vow, but it's a time for asceticism is what you should have in the notes. So this is a time for asceticism. What does asceticism mean? That means fasting, abstinence, doing penance. Not enjoying the goods of this life so you can focus, on your relationship with God. Chapter 6. And the Lord said to Moses, say to the sons of Israel, when either a man or a woman makes a special vow, the vow of a Nazarite, to separate himself to the Lord, he shall separate himself from wine and strong drink. All right, so what's the point of this this vow? It's to separate yourself to the Lord, all right? They didn't have monks and nuns in the Old Testament. We talked about like the temple virgins being something akin, to a convent, but I mean, they're definitely not the exact same thing. And then this Nazarite vow would have been those people who are, say, like they're taking on a voluntary Lent, or they're taking on a voluntary time of some asceticism, which you might like expect to see from a hermit. He shall drink no vinegar made from wine or strong drink, and shall not drink any juice of grapes, or eat grapes fresh or dried. Why is there a ban on vinegar? Because vinegar is simply old wine. All right, so they can't have anything off the vine, really, to abstain from wine. But the whole spectrum, new wine, whether it's just the freshly crushed grapes or the old wine, the vinegar, they are to be cut off completely. So that's rule number 1. No drink. All right, no drinking from the vine. Verse 4, all the days of his separation he shall eat nothing that is produced by the grapevine, not even the seeds or the skins. All the days of his vow of separation, no razor shall come upon his head, until the time is completed for which he separates himself to the Lord. He shall be holy. He shall let the locks of his hair of his head grow long. So that's rule number 2. Rule number 1, nothing from the vine. Rule number 2, can't cut your hair during this time period. Verse 6, all the days that he separates himself to the Lord, he shall not go near a dead body. That's rule number 3. Can't touch any dead thing. Not attending any funerals. If you see, the jawbone of a dead ass in the wilderness and you pick it up to go kill some Philistines and you're a Nazarite, that would also be very bad. I'm referencing the story of Samson. So even just like we normally think of Samson and his downfall being with Delilah, but there's even things in his story leading up to that point where it's like, hey, you're a Nazarite. You're not supposed to be touching a dead animal. That if you're aware of the Pentateuch, then you pick up on all those little things. Yes, Caleb.
My question with that is, for that 1,000 dudes, all of them, like, swords are coming at you, and you're there, one dude, without any weapons. Wouldn't that be, and you don't got a lot of time to plan, wouldn't God, make an exception if you picked up, the only thing you had and started using it? Because, you wouldn't really want to die, would you?
Okay, who fights your battles that are successful? Do you fight them or does Yahweh fight them? And the whole theme of the Pentateuch is that Yahweh is the one who goes out and fights your battles for you. And what Yahweh asks for is covenantal faithfulness. So that would be the answer to that question.
So you just go hand to hand?
Yeah, the fact that he's beating up 100 guys, clearly God's on his side to begin with. Anywho, and that's a lot of what the book of Maccabees is about that, relying on your fidelity to the covenant and letting God fight your battles. Verse 7, neither for his father, nor his mother, nor for brother or sister, if they die, shall he make himself unclean, because his separation to God is upon his head. All the days of his separation he is holy to the Lord. And if any man dies suddenly beside him, and he defiles his consecrated head, then he shall shave his head on the day of his cleansing. On the 7th day he shall shave it. On the 8th day he shall bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons to the priest to the door of the tent of meeting. And the priest shall offer one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering, and make atonement for him. Let's jump down to verse 13. And this is the law for the Nazarite. When the time for his separation has been completed, he shall be brought to the door of the tent of meeting, and he shall offer his gift to the Lord, 1 male lamb a year old without blemish for a burnt offering, and 1 ewe lamb a year old without blemish as a sin offering, and 1 ram without blemish as a peace offering, and a basket of unleavened bread, cakes of fine flour mixed with oil, and unleavened wafers spread with oil, and their cereal offering and their drink offerings. Jump down to verse 18. And the Nazarite shall shave his consecrated head at the door of the tent of meeting, and shall take the hair from his consecrated head and put it on the fire, which is under the sacrifice of the peace offering. Verse 20. And the priest shall wave them for a wave offering before the Lord. They are a holy portion for the priest, together with the breast that is waved and the thigh that is offered. And after that, the Nazarite may drink wine. This is the law of the Nazarite who takes a vow. His offering to the Lord shall be according to his vows of Nazarite, apart from what else he can afford. In accordance with the vow which he takes, so shall he do according to the law for his separation as a Nazarite. So those are the 3 rules of the Nazarites. Don't have any wine or anything off the vine. Don't cut your hair during this time, and don't touch any dead things. And then you're supposed to be focusing on asceticism, right? That puts you apart from the world. You're consecrated to Yahweh. The way you begin the Nazarite vow is you begin by shaving your head. And then your Nazarite vow concludes by, again, shaving your head. So what's the practical use of that? Well, maybe you've seen someone who has luscious locks and they showed up with a shaved head. It's rather startling. It's like, oh my gosh, there's something different about this person. So the shaved head, what that does is it communicates to your community that you're now under vow. So they know when they see that you have a shaved head, I'm not going to offer him anything to drink. I know he can't be touching any dead things, so on and so forth. And so you go through that time period, whatever you've consecrated yourself for, and then at the conclusion of it, you shave your head again, and when people see that your head has been reshaved, they now know that your vow is completed. All right, so there's a convenience factor in signaling to the world, that your appointed time has begun or that it's ended for your asceticism. All right, jump ahead to chapter 10. And at chapter 10, I just want you to make a note that chapter 10 onward, this is when the wandering in the wilderness begins. Up to this point, they've been camping out at Mount Sinai. And now they are beginning to depart Mount Sinai and work their way towards the promised land. Chapter 10, verse 11. In the second year, in the second month, on the 20th day of the month, the cloud was taken up from over the tabernacle of the covenant, the Shekinah. God's presence is lifted. And in Exodus, right, when the cloud goes up, that's when it's time for Israel to change camp. Verse 12. And the sons of Israel set out by stages from the wilderness of Sinai, and the cloud settled down in the wilderness of Paran. And they set out for the first time at the command of the Lord by Moses. The standard of the camp of the men of Judah set out first. So underline that preeminence of the tribe of Judah. They are taking the lead. They set out first by their companies. And over their host was Nahshon, the son of Amminadab. Yes, Caleb, you had a question? Sure. So, question for you guys. How long do you think it takes to go from Mount Sinai to the Promised Land?
41 years.
How long do you think it would take you to walk from one location to another?
Like 10 months.
Pesci, what did Caleb say?
41. I said 3 months.
3 months? Isaac, do you have a guess?
What?
How long do you think it takes to walk from Mount Sinai to the Promised Land?
I wagered pretty quick.
You wager pretty quick. Like how quick? A month or two? Okay. Chapter 11 is the complaining in the desert. It takes, ready for this? It takes 3 days to walk from Mount Sinai to the Promised Land. You were close. 3 days. So you'll definitely want to have that note as the help fill in the context of this. So the glory cloud, God's presence rises up and it goes ahead of them. They pack up their bags. They got a 3 days journey. Chapter 11. And the people complained in the hearing of the Lord about their misfortunes. And when the Lord heard it, his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed some outlying parts of the camp. Then the people cried to Moses, and Moses prayed to the Lord, and the fire abated. So the name of the place was called Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burned among them. Now the rabble that was among them had a strong craving. And the people of Israel also wept again, saying, "Oh, that we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt for nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our strength is dried up, and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at." 3 more days, and then the land flowing with milk and honey. Verse 7. Now the manna was like coriander seed, which you guys know what that means now. In its appearance like that of gum resin, the people went about and gathered it and ground it in mills or beat it in mortars and boiled it in pots and made cakes of it. And the taste of it was like the taste of cakes baked with oil. When the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell with it. Moses heard the people weeping throughout their families, every man at the door of his tent And the anger of the Lord blazed hotly, and Moses was displeased. So even the grown-up men are at their camps. They're outside their houses crying because they don't have garlic and cucumbers, and they're sick of this manna, and they're 3 days away from the promised land. Moses said to the Lord, "Why have you dealt ill with your servant? And why have I not found favor in your sight that you lay the burden of all this people upon me? Did I conceive all this people? Did I bring them forth that you should say to me, carry them in your bosom as a nurse carries the suckling child to the land which you swore to give their fathers? Where am I to get meat to give to all this people? For they weep before me and say, give us meat that we may eat. And I am not able to carry all this people alone. The burden is too heavy for me. If you will deal thus with me, kill me at once. If I find favor in your sight, they may not see my wretchedness." All right, so Moses is now going to God, complaining that these people are miserable. They're acting like babies. Please end my life. I can't take this anymore. All right, so he's pleading to God as a father. Yes, Asheron. We are at Numbers 11, and we just finished verse 15. Verse 16. And the Lord said to Moses, gather for me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people and officers over them, and bring them to the tent of meeting, and let them take their stand there with you. And I will come down and talk with you there, and I will take some of the Spirit which is upon you, and put it upon them. And they shall bear the burden of the people with you, that you may not bear it yourself alone. And say to the people, consecrate yourselves for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat. For you have wept in the hearing of the Lord, saying, who will give us meat to eat? For it was well with us in Egypt. Therefore the Lord will give you meat, and you shall eat. You shall not eat 1 day, or 2 days, or 5 days, or 10 days, or 20 days, but a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils. All right? So this is God being fed up, no pun intended, with the Israelites. He's going to give them so much meat that it's literally going to be coming out of their noses, due to their lack of faith in his providence and their lack of fortitude in taking a 3 days journey into the land flowing with milk and honey. Until it comes out of your nostrils, verse 20, and becomes loathsome to you, because you have rejected the Lord who is among you, and have wept for him, saying, why did we come forth out of Egypt? Verse 21. But Moses said, the people among whom I am number 600,000 on foot, and you have said, I will give them meat, that they may eat a whole month? Shall flocks and herds be slaughtered for them to satisfy them? Or shall all the fish of the sea be gathered together for them to satisfy them? And the Lord said to Moses, is the Lord's hand shortened? Now you shall see whether my word will come true for you or not. So Moses went out and told the people the words of the Lord, and he gathered 70 men of the elders of the people and placed them round about the tent. Then the Lord came down in the Shekinah, in the glory cloud, and spoke to them, and took some of the Spirit that was upon him, and put it upon the 70 elders. And when the Spirit rested upon them, they prophesied. But they did so no more. All right, so now the 70 elders, they're prophets. What does that mean? They're now the mouthpiece of God. So the burden of Moses is now split amongst these other elders who can also go about the camp prophesying, speaking on behalf of God when the Spirit of God is resting on them. Verse 26, now 2 men remained in the camp of those 70 elders. So only 68 showed up to the tent of meeting. One named Eldad and the other named Medad. And the Spirit rested upon them, and they were among those registered, but they had not gone out to the tent. And so they prophesied in the camp. And a young man ran and told Moses, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. And Joshua, the son of Nun, the minister of the Lord, one of his chosen men, said, my lord Moses, forbid them. But Moses said to him, are you jealous for my sake? Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put his Spirit upon them. And Moses and the elders of Israel returned to camp. So Moses just uttered a prophecy regarding Pentecost. Would that the Lord would put his Spirit upon all of them. That is what happens at Pentecost. That is the current age we're living in the church. when you are baptized and when you are confirmed, you receive the Holy Spirit. Right? The Spirit of God does rest upon you. In the era of the Old Testament, that is not the case. But in this new era of the New Covenant, that is, we're living in the age of the Holy Spirit. So Moses has this foreshadowing of Pentecost, and it's one thing to think about and be grateful that we do have, that gift in the church that is working proactively. And hence that might explain why hopefully we're a little bit more resilient than the Israelites. You make a 3 days journey from Sinai to the Promised Land. Now, after just talking about the Spirit of the Lord, we read verse 31, and there went forth a wind from the Lord. Now, wind in Hebrew, remember it's ruah, so it's also spirit. Wind and spirit have the exact same word. So there went forth a spirit from the Lord, or a wind from the Lord, and it brought quails from the sea and let them fall beside the camp about a day's journey on this side and a day's journey on the other side, round about the camp, and about 2 cubits above the face of the earth. That's about 3 feet. So all around the camp, if you walk for a day, you're running through quails coming about yay high. God said he was going to give them a month amount of meat, and so much will come out of their nose, and that's exactly what he did. Shocker, I know. Verse 32, and the people rose all that day and all night and all the next day and gathered the quails. He who gathered least gathered 10 homers. What does that mean? 2,200 liters. What's 2,200 liters? Don't ask me that, but I know it's 10 homers, okay? Think of like 2-liter soda. I don't know. And 2,200. I might be thinking of something else. Because it's also not a liquid. Quails aren't liquid. But you can Google this on your own time. And they spread them out for themselves all around the camps. While the meat was yet between their teeth, before it was consumed, the anger of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord struck the people with a very great plague. Therefore, the name of that place was called Kilbroth Hatava, because there they buried the people who had the craving. From Kilbarathata, the people journeyed to Hazeroth, and they remained at Hazeroth. Chapter 12 is, I think, a very important, insightful episode to meditate on. Aaron and Miriam speak against Moses, and they have to deal with the consequence of speaking against God's servant. Chapter 12, Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman who he had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. And they said, has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? And the Lord heard it. Now the man Moses was very meek, more than all the men who were on the face of the earth. And suddenly the Lord called to Moses and to Aaron and Miriam, come out, you 3, to the tent of meeting. And the 3 of them came out. And the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the door of the tent and called Aaron and Miriam. And they both came forward. And he said, hear my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is entrusted with all my house. With him I speak mouth to mouth, clearly, and not in dark speech. And he beholds the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? And the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and he departed. And when the cloud removed from over the tent, behold, Miriam was leprous, as white as snow. And Aaron turned towards Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. And Aaron said to Moses, O my Lord, do not punish us because we have done foolishly and have sinned. Let her not be as one dead, of whom the flesh is half consumed, when he comes out of his mother's womb. And Moses cried to the Lord, heal her, O God, I beg you. But the Lord said to Moses, if her father had but spit in her face, should she not be shamed 7 days? Let her be shut up outside the camp 7 days. Thank you. And after that, she may be brought in again. Verse 15. So Miriam was shut up outside the camp 7 days, and the people did not set out on the march till Miriam was brought in again. And the people set out from Hazeroth and encamped in the wilderness of Paran. All right, so what's the moral of that lesson? maybe give it some second thoughts before you start complaining or griping or speaking against those who God has put in a position of authority over you. Not that you can never question or ask questions regarding those in authority. And there's plenty of examples of saints who do rightly go out and criticize religious authority figures, right? But I think the lesson you can take from this is from Miriam and from Aaron, and the punishment they get is, do it prudentially. It's not something you should just willy-nilly gossip about and make a habit of always complaining and then actually doing nothing about it. Okay? Yakio? Yeah. Yeah. And again, I'm not saying that you can never outright criticize, but I think people tend to criticize more so than have respect. So that's why I just draw attention to that theme here. Yes, Loam, we are about to begin chapter 13 of Numbers. Chapter 13, spies are sent into Canaan. You can make a note here to Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 22. The Lord said to Moses, "Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I give to the sons of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers shall you send a man, every one a leader among them." So Moses sent them out from the wilderness of Paran, according to the command of the Lord, all of them men who were heads of the sons of Israel. And these were their names: from the tribe of Reuben, Shamuma, the son of Zakur; from the tribe of Simeon, Shaphat, the son of Hori; from the tribe of Judah, Caleb, the son of Jephunneh. So highlight verse 6. From Judah's tribe, we get Caleb. He's really important. Jump down to verse 7, or just continue to verse 7. From the tribe of Issachar, Igal, the son of Joseph. Verse 8. Highlight verse 8. From the tribe of Ephraim, Hoshea, the son of Nun. That is Joshua. So the tribe of Ephraim. Who is Ephraim's father? Joseph, right? So this is the head tribe of Joseph. Remember, Joseph brought his sons to Israel, and Israel did the switcheroo, and he blessed the younger one. Ephraim's the younger one. So the two prominent spies, the two prominent scouts, are Caleb from Judah and Joshua, who is from Ephraim, the tribe of Joseph. We can jump down to verse 16. These were the names of the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land, and Moses called Hoshea, the son of Nun, Joshua. Verse 17. Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan and said to them, "Go up into the Negeb, yonder, and go up into the hill country and see what the land is, and whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, whether they are few or many, and whether the land that they dwell in is good or bad, and whether the cities that they dwell in are camps or strongholds, and whether the land is rich or poor, and whether there is wood in it or not. Be of good courage, and bring some of the fruit of the land." Now the time was the season of the first ripe grapes. So they went up and spied out the land from the wilderness of Zin to Rehob, near the entrance of Hamath. They went up into the Negeb and came to Hebron, and Ahiman, Sheshai, and Talmai, the descendants of Anak, were there. Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. Verse 23. And they came to the valley of Eshcol and cut down from there a bunch with a single cluster of grapes, and they carried it on a pole between two of them. They brought also some pomegranates and figs. That place was called the valley of Eshcol because of the cluster which the men of Israel cut down from there. At the end of 40 days, they returned from spying out the land. And they came to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the sons of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. And they brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him, "We came to the land which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Verse 28, underline. Yet the people who dwell in the land are strong. And the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. Verse 29, the Amalekites dwell in the land of the Negeb. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites dwell in the hill countries, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan. Verse 30, but Caleb, what tribe is Caleb from? Judah, make note of it. The man from Judah. Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. Then the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. So they brought to the sons of Israel an evil report of the land, which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And there we saw the Nephilim. You guys remember the Nephilim? Those are the giants from Genesis. The Nephilim, the sons of Anak. And we seem to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seem to them. All right, so the Nephilim, that means the fallen ones. They're referenced as the people who died in the flood. All right, so they're going and they're saying, like, look, this place is occupied with giants. There's nothing we can do. Let's not bother going in. Chapter 14. Then all the congregation raised a loud cry, and the people wept that night, all the grown men crying like babies. And all the sons of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron. The whole congregation said to them, would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would that we had died in this wilderness. Okay, you can underline that. They're going to get their wish. Why does the Lord bring us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt? Make it up to Genesis 12, verses 7 through 10. In Genesis 12, 7 to 10, Abraham goes to Egypt. Abraham leaves the promised land. And what awaits Abraham in Egypt? A polygamous murderer. All right? The Israelites just left a polygamous murderer. They left the land of idolatry. They've seen all these plagues, everything God's done for them, and they're right on the border of entering the promised land. They're saying, we should go back to Egypt. Or better yet, we can die in this wilderness instead. So they're going to get their wish granted to them. Verse 4, and they said to one another, let us choose a captain and go back to Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the sons of Israel. And Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb of Juniphah, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes. So Caleb and Joshua are bringing a good report. The other 10 spies are the ones spreading these rumors about the giants and how they can't conquer the land. Verse 7, and said to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, the land which we passed through to spy it out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, or do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Emmanuel, God is with us. Do not fear them. But the congregation said to stone them with stones. So they're about to kill Caleb, Joshua, Moses, and Aaron. They're ready to pick up a bunch of rocks and just keep throwing rocks until they concuss them out of consciousness and concuss them to death. Then the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting to all the sons of Israel. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will this people despise me? And how long will they not believe in me in spite of all the signs which I have wrought among them? I will strike them with the pestilence and disinherit them, and I will make of you, Moses, a nation greater and mightier than they. So we're now back to where we started after the golden calf, where God is ready to just kill everyone in Israel, and he's going to start from scratch with Moses. And just like he did with the golden calf, Moses is going to intercede for the people. Verse 17, and now I beg you, this is Moses speaking to God, let the power of the Lord be great as you have promised, saying, the Lord is slow to anger and abounding in mercy, forgiving iniquity and transgression, but he will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of fathers upon children, upon their third and upon the fourth generation. I remember, Yahweh, when you told me you were a God merciful, abounding in mercy. I want to call to mind that. Verse 19, pardon the iniquity of this people, I beg you, according to the greatness of your mercy, and according as you have forgiven this people from Egypt, even until now. So God decides he's going to reveal to Moses that, yes, his mercy is even that deep. When you repent, God will be merciful. But God's also going to be just. So, verse 26. And the Lord said to Moses and to Aaron, how long shall this wicked congregation murmur against me? I have heard the murmurings of the sons of Israel, which they murmur against me. Say to them, as I live, says the Lord, what you have said in my hearing, I will do to you. Your dead bodies shall fall in the wilderness. So you can make a note back to chapter 14, verse 2. Chapter 14, verse 2 is when the people say, would we have just died in this wilderness? God says, I hear you. Let's go with that option. And this begins the 40 years wandering in the wilderness. Most people get it confused. They think that Israel has to wander 40 years in the wilderness because of the golden calf. That's not why. It's because they come up to the promised land and they refuse to go in it. And they say they'd rather die in the wilderness than have to go conquer this land. And then God grants them their wish, their desire. Why 40 years? Average lifespan of a person. You're not going to, if you make it to 60 in the ancient world, that is some pretty dang impressive genes back then, okay? Who are the guilty? The men who are 20 and up, okay, the full adults are responsible. So in the span of 40 years, you're going to kill off this generation that's responsible, and then a new generation is going to step in and be able to take the promised land that's been given to them. Let's stop there for today. So the 40 years begins at verse 26. Hopefully you have that written down.